Hey guys, everyone's been asking me about my TRX4 Bronco, and so I decided to put together a little video just kind of showing what parts I used to put it together and exactly how I did it. I decided to take everything apart and lay it out here, so the very first thing that I could show you would be all the parts that I had to buy and what I had to do to actually get this done. The first thing is you obviously need your TRX4, obviously, and you're going to need a Element RC IFS kit. So here's how I went about this. A lot of you guys, if you're going to take on this project, you're just going to look at it, see how I did it, get your own ideas, and go about it however you want, so it doesn't really matter. But just so you guys can see exactly what I did. The very first thing I need to mention is that I was not the very first person to do IFS on a TRX4. The guy's actually in my friends list and on the TRX4 community, but his name is Dalton Kurchov. Very nice guy. He actually gave me his 3D print file that he made for using the IFS on the TRX4. He hasn't given me permission to give it out, and I don't really want to give it out to people, so you'll have to find him on there if you want to ask for the file. But what he did is he modified a 10.2 file with a TRX4 steering rack and made it so that way, you know, like it would bolt right onto a TRX4 frame. Now the most important thing that Dalton has done here is he has shortened up the IFS mounting plate to where one of the bulkhead screws right here, or the diff riser, I think is what it's called, is integrated into the servo right here. That makes a huge difference in the TRX4 because it makes it so that way you don't have any motor clearance issues, which is the most important thing. I don't have any issues running a 540 or a 550 sized motor with this setup in here, but if you were to do it with a normal Element IFS plate, which I don't have anymore, you'd have to run a stubby revolver motor. It would be the only way that you'd be able to fit one. So that was pretty crucial. Part of doing that was I had to make my own steering link here. That part was super easy. All I did was use two random rod ends. I really wouldn't even be able to tell you what I used. And then just a super short grub screw. Screwed them together until, you know, it was about centered. That was pretty easy. I get full lock steering all the way. This super short screw here has not affected my steering throw whatsoever as far as where my bump stop hits the block right here. It obviously oversteered the other way. That's because I don't have the block right here to stop it. There's that. So I needed that. As you can see here, I used the Night Customs diff lift mod. I'm sure you've seen a lot of my other videos. I'm not really a big fan of the Night Customs kit on my Night Runner down there. I don't like it on the Element frame, but on the TRX4 frame, it happened to just make everything line up perfectly when using the portals with it. So I would definitely recommend getting the Night Customs diff riser and skid plate and using that for this also, just because it kind of it just makes everything line up a lot nicer. So there's that. Some random links that I had laying around. These were off of a 10.2 kit. I had to use that to help mount the lower section of the IFS. This is the Night Customs front skid plate that comes with the diff lift. I had to use, well, I didn't have to. I was lucky enough for this to line up perfectly. This is an RC four-wheel drive Rook 2 bumper. It's for a Trailfinder 2. I have 3 of these bumpers. Every single one of them have broken in the same exact place right here. So as long as you grind them down and weld them beforehand, then they're great. But otherwise, I can guarantee you that they're going to break eventually right there at the weld spots. The RC four-wheel drive has the weakest welds I've ever seen. It's pretty crazy. And then I use the RC four-wheel drive conversion bumper mount. I don't even know why I ended up buying that, but luckily I did because it fit with this IFS kit perfectly. This is a MIP HD driveline for a TRX4 Bronco, the 12.3. This I don't know what year that thing's supposed to be, like an 88 or 89 Bronco. That's what that is from MIP. My RRD shocks. You can see these in my Element RC IFS shock tuning video if you'd like to see more on that. And then portals obviously had to be modified, but those already came with the TRX4 lower mount section. I had to make this here. So I took the stock Element lower diff housing, just kind of grinded and cut it until it kind of let the TRX4 housing sit in this really nicely. And then I had to build this right here, which was pretty simple. It's just 2 bends and a couple holes to drill. And this is what my lower links mount to stabilize the rear. You can't use the Element RC, I don't know, driveline skid, rear IFS support, I don't know what it's called, but it's not going to fit on the TRX4. At least it's not going to look good if you do it. So I built this. The last thing I'm working on in my project is to make a 3D print file that replaces this part right here and this part all as one piece, and that adds a circle right here on the input to the front diff, so that way it stops my diff from trying to lift up this way, which is the only thing that's happening whenever I'm out there wheeling. Alright, so thank you, Dalton, for your print file. I really would not have made it this far nearly as fast or as easily without you doing this, that's for sure. So, very first thing, gotta get that thing printed, mount everything up on it. Second thing, if you're gonna do the front diff, you're gonna start out with the TRX4 front axle. See, I'm right here. I literally took a hacksaw and just cut off the axle tubes here and here, and then just put the Element RC dog bone cups in here. I did have to very lightly sand them, but I think if you're willing to push hard enough, they'd probably pop in, but getting them back out, even after sanding them, they're a tight fit. So I wouldn't want to shove them in there with how tight they are stock, personally. So I cut those off, and I used my upper link mount right here on the diff riser lift section. And you can see that what I actually had to do is I trimmed right here with the Dremel, and then trimmed it completely flat here with the Dremel, and then I just lined it up until it was completely flat right here, lined up my hole, and then drilled it through here. And that was my very first mount for the front diff. So that way I can kind of mock everything up and build my file for the part that's going to encapsulate this right here and stop it from twisting. So I'm going to have to reprint a lot of this stuff afterwards, because it all has strip screws now from how many times I've taken apart and put it all back together, which is mainly because either, you know, test fitting stuff and changing it, or right now because the video. So I really don't care about any of these screws getting any more stripped than they already are at this point, because I'm probably going to have to replace them all anyways. So you get that in there. Upper arms here, steering rack's all built. Have the steering servo mounted at the top of the steering plate. And there we are on the frame. All right. So we've got our front fenders mounted. The IFS bulkhead is mounted. We're pretty close to getting towards where we need to be. Next thing we're going to do is put on the front bumper. This is the RC four-wheel drive Rook 2 bumper and the RC four-wheel drive TRX4 conversion mount for the RC four-wheel drive bumper system. I use this Rook 2 bumper on pretty much every single build that I do. It's my favorite bumper as far as style and looks. Like I said, you gotta do some welding if you want to use it. It is truly poorly made. Alright, so the reason why the Rook 2 bumper ends up being such a good thing to buy is because if you use it, then your front skid plate is going to line up perfectly with bolting straight to it. Now, whether you use the Element front skid plate or the Knight Customs one, it's still going to bolt in here just like so. I mean, it literally lines up as if we were bolting up to an Element when you use this, and that was just the niftiest thing as far as I'm concerned. So, here's that. Front skid plate installed. We're now going to get out the lower section, which I showed you earlier, right over here. So I'm going to take out these screws that I left in here, so that way I wouldn't misplace where they went. This is seriously the nicest electric screwdriver I've ever seen for the RC hobby. 10 out of 10 recommend. That alone, with this pinch fed in here, really holds that front diff in place really well. So now comes in these links that we talked about earlier in the video. So we are still going to use 2 lower links and 1 upper link, just like the stock TRX4. Now, the reason why we're using an upper link still is because it adds a point of triangulation. And for anyone who's ever worked in any kind of suspension design, you know that triangulation is where we get power, or where we get strength. So anywhere that you can add triangles, you're always going to have a much stronger setup than one without. And just a single lower on this side with no upper. Now for the upper link on the other side, I used a Traxxas / I don't know if it was a toe link, a camber link, I don't have any idea. I just carry a absolute ton extra all variety of links with me when I go out with the slash. So I truly don't have any clue which one it was that I used there. And like I said, I'm planning on replacing pretty much all this hardware when we're done here. So I'm not really concerned about ruining hardware. Alright. So now on to the next part of the show, portals. Same side? Yeah, same side. So what you're going to notice here is the actual height of the portal itself. So what I did is I shaved this mount down until it was flush with the top of the steering knuckle. That part was pretty easy to do, pretty straightforward, not really a whole lot to explain there. And these ball studs are off of a Red Cat Volcano 110 steering rack setup, so that was pretty simple to do there. The lower is where we get difficult. So on the lower, I actually ground down all the way to here. And you can see from looking at this one, I went all the way down to where this bearing sits for your secondary portal gear. So this is really a really deep cut, and this is not on the same hole either. I went down to that hole was gone, and then I re-drilled the hole way further out. And I mean like a lot further out, because I had to have enough clearance for the lower link end to pop in right here and actually be able to flex up and down. If you don't do this, then you will not gain any ground clearance from using portals on an IFS setup. Because of the lower arm sitting all the way down here with how the portals are right now, you will gain 0 ground clearance from doing this. The only thing that you'll gain is the gearing from the portals, which really, who cares? You know, I mean, you can gear for anything. So realistically, if you don't do this, there's no real reason to be doing this mod anyways. Alright, so last and 100% for sure not least is the axle shafts. You're going to have to cut the TRX4 axle shaft in half. Well, shorter than half on one half, and the other one's going to be in half. And then on this, the element ones are going to have to be cut about 1/3 of the way up from the dog bones. Then you're going to have to sleeve it with a round stock, and I brazed mine back together. Soldering is definitely not strong enough. Dalton Kirchhoff can tell you that. They will break. You're going to have to braze these. In my opinion, MAP gas brazing isn't really brazing. Oxy-settling torches, I used Lucas and Homp's 507 steel welding fill, or steel brazing rod. It's the only material that they recommend for brazing on a steel anything. So that was pretty nice. The other thing is on these toe links for the IFS steering setup, I had to unscrew them, I think about 4 turns. You can see there's just, a couple threads showing on each side. It wasn't a ton. It was just enough to give me some toe out, so that way I had a steeper steering angle to basically match how the stock element is. I mean, I would say the steering angle is almost exactly how the stock element is. It's not great, but it's not terrible at all. And when I say it's not terrible at all, I'm just referring to the IFS, not the straight axle. The straight axle is obviously fine. The IFS kind of reminds me of upgraded 10.1 days as far as what kind of steering angle you can actually get out of it. So, easiest part here, because I already have the axle shafts installed. Just clip the dog bones in place. I like to squeeze the two together. Seems to be a lot easier. Once again, dog bone in place. And squeeze the upper and lowers together. Pop the steering rack on. Got some weak fingers. It's been a long week at work. I steer it all the way back the other way so that way I can reach it. Got that one. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm using my shocks from my shock setup that few people saw earlier in the week. Another really nice thing about using the Night Customs kit on here is, besides the steering lining up so well for the portals, my 110 millimeter shocks also line up really well. Before using the Night Customs kit on here, I tried using some Red Cat 120 millimeter shocks, and those were the right length for where it was sitting. But man, those shocks were even worse than these ones. Honestly though, the only shocks I've ever been happy with are Team Associated shocks and TRX4 shocks. I guess I'm putting my standards too high. Then my front selectable locker has got to be changed right here. The only thing that's left now, I rolled all my electronics back out of the way so that way nothing would be hanging up and stopping you from being able to see. And this front battery tray I cut out to fit around the steering servo and my ESC. And the reason why I chose to do that is because it's an awesome shock tower brace to stop any flexing in there. You got to run really stiff springs, so you want to make sure you keep these things strong. Earlier I forgot to mention that when you add the portals to the Element IFS, it's going to end up a lot wider than the rear axle. And like even with the portal rear axle, it's going to be significantly wider. But you will be able to fix it by just unscrewing the rod ends out of the upper and lower control arms and trimming a 1/4 inch off of each one of them, and then screwing them back in. Basically, the lower one's in about flush with where it starts to taper. They both are about that far in. They're pretty far in. But either way, you're going to have to play with it and kind of see the width that you want. And also, I forgot to show you why you end up wanting to use the MIP drive line. The reason why is because it clears the transmission. And I mean, it barely clears, but it does. So to me, that's worthwhile. Just like that, here we are. Like I said, I just moved all my electronics out of the way so that you'd be able to see the video better. I have everything put back up and tidied up after this because I am headed out to Elk Rock tomorrow. So I want to bring this bad boy with me, see what it can do. And with that, I guess we'll be seeing some video tomorrow of how it does out there. For right now, to stop the differential from rising upwards, I'm just running a zip tie that basically is encapsulating the input and stopping it from pulling upwards. It's pretty hokey for that part right now, but it hasn't broken. It works really good. So I just need to work on that 3D print file and hope that I can finish that up pretty soon. But I'm having a lot of fun wheeling it. So we will see how motivated I stay to continue to work on the computer designing that. Till next time, have a wonderful day, and yeah, see you next time.